Atmosphere is a powerful thing. It can make or break an experience, whether it be a film, a book, or a video game. Without it, things can appear muted, flat, devoid of any, real atmosphere. It's a thing creators of video games have been trying to cram into their games from the late 80s, using atmosphere as a selling point for a game, however it became common practice in the 90s, in part aided by the transition from 2D to 3D based titles and the bump up in budgets, giving a game a sense of place and meaning became forefront to many developers. Some choose to push as many shiny pixels into their game's engines as possible to best aid their vision, while some opt to build a compelling narrative that captivates the audience, like a good book. They all have their ways of achieving this. It's not quite as important as general feel and gameplay, but it still has an important part to play. Even the gameplay mechanics itself can be used to complement and inform the atmosphere the game is trying to achieve. Dark Souls, for example, its harsh aesthetic complements the harsh controls, which informs the overall brutal atmosphere of the game. Last year in particular was a year of atmosphere-intensive games. Uncharted, Inside, Firewatch, Battlefield, Overwatch and even FIFA all implemented their own takes on what atmosphere meant to them. Two games however stand out to me the most: Gears of War 4 and Doom. When done right and with care, a good sense of atmosphere can make or break a game. Even though holding a controller and staring at a TV screen is a constant reminder that you're playing a game, it's nice when a developer takes the time to create a place that feels authentic and believable. I'm not talking photorealistic believable. It refers more to a buy-in ability of it all. Does it fit? Does the strength of the director's vision shine through enough, strongly enough to encapsulate me? Gears of War 4, released in an attempt to put Microsoft's Juggernaut series back into the spotlight last year, is a fine example of atmosphere building done correctly. It wasn't alone. Naughty Dog did an amazing job with Uncharted 4, but the way Gears of War accomplishes this is different. The old saying that familiarity breeds contempt can often ring true throughout a lot of Gears of War 4. The shooting hasn't evolved much, so it's snappier and a little easier to switch between weapons, etc. But for the most part, most of Gears of War feels very samey. While it does a slight disservice to certain aspects of the game, it's the world itself that benefits, and ultimately the player too. There's a sense of weight to the world that's often lacking in some games. The skyscapes are intricately detailed, the use of real-time lighting working brilliantly, and at times the game is truly beautiful. Tie this in with an incredibly rich and varied sound design, where you can hear the sound of loose gravel crunching beneath the feet of JD, Kate and Del as they enter a moon-soaked clearing. The crackling of the trees in the wind, the soundtrack to a trip down memory lane as JD and Del recount childhood memories in the Phoenix Manor. Moments like these define Gears of War's approach to atmosphere. It triggers our own sense of nostalgia. 11 years of Gears of War history summed up in a few moments. It's hard not to see the connection between this conversation, the action that's occurring, and the location it's taking place in. Neither is it a coincidence that this conversation is taking place where it is, neither that it's taking place between JD and Del.
Was it always like this?
No, it wasn't. I got a lot of happy memories of this place.
Wish I could say the same.
In order for the coalition to sell us on the vision, we have to be invested, even more so considering these are new characters brought to the franchise. We need a reason to care about them. It's slightly easier with JD, considering he's Marcus Phoenix's son, but what about Del and Kate? Well, making it abundantly clear that JD and Del are long-term friends helps put Del into some kind of perspective. They have a history, so the player at least has faith in their relationship. Kate, on the other hand, was a harder sell. Making her love interest alone wouldn't cut it. The developer decided to go full Mel Gibson retribution story and suitably had her home village ransacked and her mother snatched, pun intended. By giving Kate an emotional driving force, she not only served as the vehicle for the game's plot, but also as a driving force for the player's actions. More so than most games, Gears of War laid all of this out rather early, making sure that the player felt as acclimated to the new cast as possible. By making sure that this was done quickly, allowed the developer to hone in on the aspects of the game that mattered the most. Any slow walk through an abandoned courtyard felt tense. It didn't just look it. All things were working together to make sure that the game had an atmospheric punch. Creating a moody looking corridor does nothing if the need to walk through it isn't there. The gunplay reward was enough, but feeling connected to the character helped add a sense of consequence to the world. In its quieter moments, Gears of War really excels at creating a sense of involvement to the player, even if not much is going on. These moments are there to help build the desire to see these characters onto the end of their journey. It may not be perfect, but it's effective.
Shit! Condor coming in! Hey, Condor going down!
While quieter moments are welcome in games, it's not for everyone. Some games excel at taking the louder approach. While Gears of War on the whole built its atmosphere in its downtime, 2016's Doom plays to the beat of a different drum. Although Doom is a first-person shooter, its differences to Gears of War aren't as clear-cut as it would seem. Gears of War was in part inspired by Doom, so there's no surprise that Doom seems to have been paying some attention to Microsoft's movements as well. Both have a beefy arsenal, which make you feel powerful, yet require some thought in their use. Both are built on the principal rule of clear the room and proceed gameplay, and both rely heavily on atmosphere. Taking place on Mars and in Hell, Doom uses two different techniques to convey a sense of atmosphere. On Mars, the combat zones / arenas are interspersed with quieter areas. The quieter areas use as a slight respite and a means to store collectibles and other world-building items. The combat rooms, however, is where the magic happens. When surrounded by 20 ghouls in all different shapes and sizes, panic can set in, yet if armed with a level head, you take moments to distinguish which enemy to attack and which tool of destruction is best suited. Referred to as combat chess, Doom constantly has you on the move both physically within the game and mentally. The pendulum can swing in an instant. In order to gain health, you must be brave. In order to avoid death, you must think one step ahead. This design principle is used throughout the entirety of the game, and it helps create an atmosphere no other FPS had last year. By making sure that you're always thinking one step ahead, Doom keeps your mind squarely in Doom. With your attention now firmly within the world, any attempts to draw you in further rely on good old-fashioned level design and craftsmanship. Doom's punchy audio is one of its strongest aspects as well. Soundtrack aside, although it's well suited, the environment and audio helps maintain the sense of involvement. Shotguns sound and feel weighty in comparison to the more light and nimble plasma rifle. Shrieks from ghouls in the distance help inform your playthrough choices. Much like Gears of War, Doom uses sound incredibly effectively to keep you situated firmly within its world. When the sound isn't, the visual flair on show steps in to build up the atmosphere. The arenas in which you demon slay are claustrophobic on first inspection, but offer numerous flight paths. Again, the combat chess comes into play as you use your surroundings to your advantage as much as humanly possible. When circles strafing a demon while the sound of three other imps, one located to the east, one to the west and another descending from the rafters, the brass section of Doom's atmospheric orchestra is in full swing. Muted, the sequence loses its punch. With drab level design, a sense of lethargy would kick in after the 10th glory kill. Yet, the developers id have done a fantastic job of making sure that all aspects of the game's design is working harmoniously to create an atmospheric punch that's been lacking in first-person shooters of late. It's easy to see the similarities between the two games when they're played in quick succession. While one's a first-person shooter and the other's a third-person shooter, both evoke the same sense of dread. You know the battle's coming, in waves, yet the payoff in both of these games are executed so well. Like a good action sequence in a movie, shot from the perfect angle with the perfect lighting to convey the tone the director's striving for. You're never quite surprised by the direction it's taken, but you're impressed with the cinematography, stunt work, and editing on show. Doom's sheer dedication for its craft comes across early on, typified by this now iconic guncock. Much like it did, the Coalition did a great job of adding a sense of scale to the proceedings. Taking place for the lion's share of the game across one evening definitely helps here, as things ramp up as time progresses naturally. You're constantly aware of what's gone on before in the game's past, thanks in part to an underrated intro to the game and a timer associated to your task at hand, ramped up to a higher difficulty, and it really adds an added sense of urgency to your playthrough. Granted, scale and player urgency have never really been a problem for the Gears of War franchise, yet as the first mainline entry under new management, doubts could be expected that the lightning in the bottle was lost. It doesn't have the almost movie quality direction of Uncharted 4, no other game really has, but what it lacks in direction, it more than makes up for it with the scenes on show and the stakes involved. Doom 2 has cinema-like direction dialed down a notch in comparison to its Call of Duty peers. It's extremely cutscene light, instead focusing on storytelling techniques that incorporate the movement within its world. Yet, like Gears of War, the sheer amount shoved in front of you makes up for it. There's no need for cutscenes just for the sake of it. It's a product-first mentality that pays off handsomely. Immersion and atmosphere are often rolled into being one of the same, with good reason, but one can only be obtained if the execution of the other is good enough. In other words, you can't get immersed in a video game without the atmosphere getting you to a place where the immersion can take hold. Whether it be through an A-class cast of well-versed voice actors coupled with a compelling script, or a gameplay loop involving enough that you can't help but be in the game. Atmosphere, the use of good atmosphere, is an integral tool in pushing the medium of video games forward. When a developer takes the time to develop a game that so proudly embodies its creator's vision, to the point where somebody else falls in love with that product, the consumer can only be the benefit. It pushes the boundaries in terms of how to best connect with a player and leave a lasting impression. Gears of War and Doom are excellent examples of games that exude their personas and aren't afraid to do so.
We're not stopping! We're not stopping!
Hey! We stopped!
And you said we couldn't fly.